Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast, Mike. Do you want to give a short introduction to yourself?
Sure. I'm Mike Schumacher. I'm the founder of Lakeside Software. I'm still involved in the strategy and kind of product planning in the big picture. And, a lot of kind of special projects that help the company succeed in the market. And I still enjoy opportunities to talk to a lot of our key customers and partners and really still excited about the whole digital workspace world.
Great. And on that topic, what does digital workspace mean to you?
It's interesting. Digital workspace to me is the most important tool that most knowledge workers in the world use today. It's if you think about we live in a data world, and if you think about the people that work with that data, the digital tools that they use on a day-to-day basis are absolutely critical to their happiness, overall in doing their jobs, to their success, to their productivity, and it's one of these rare cases for me where both, when you improve the quality of a digital workspace, everybody's happy. The employer is happier, they get more productivity, more results, and the employee is happy too. They have a better working experience, less frustration, and then their end customers for whatever business they're in, they benefit from a higher quality of service too. So I think that to me the digital workspace is the most important tool facing that knowledge workers use in the market today.
Yeah, and this is how we started our friendship 10 years ago. I took a role that was all about that, and now the rest of the world is sort of caught up with the pandemic, being forced to understand all these things, because now everyone's been pushed out of offices where it was a controlled environment into their homes where it's a less controlled environment, and poor connectivity and working remotely have accentuated or highlighted gaps in their workplace.
Yeah, I think even more so. You've even got hybrid work now where people work from the office largely for collaboration purposes, and then they work independently from wherever they are. So it's not even just, working from home. It's working from the office and working from home, and maybe working from the road or wherever you happen to be. So it's definitely a different world from where we were a couple of years ago. I think if you think about, when we first met, about, the world was just kind of figuring out that the data was valuable. I mean, think of all the things that if you think back 10 years ago, it was a different time and a different world.
Well, exactly. And I think the maturity of organizations in those days, there were probably, you can count them on your hand, people that were looking at this stuff and not only just to look at it from a measurement point of view, but also to manage it with proactive measures, restarting machines, doing automatic disk cleanups, looking at end user health scores to make sure they got the best experience, and looking at the productivity loss from a poor environment.
Yeah, I think that we're still just scratching the surface on what's possible with using that data to your advantage. I think it all kind of begins with kind of having a good system of record, because you can't really improve and optimize things that you can't see. So measuring it is on the path to improving it for sure. But I think that we're still using, I think relatively early days of what's possible with automation and improvement.
Yeah, that's funny the way you mention that, because a lot of the problems when you have these issues is it's all about opinions. Well, we think it's this, we think it's that causing the latency, or your machine's not working because we think it's a hard drive problem. But when you've got the data, you can actually ascertain with a much less opinionated thing, but a much more empirical view, that it actually is something. It is the hard drive, it is memory, it is CPU.
Yeah, there's actually a great analogy. Some years back, the PGA Tour started cataloging all of the shots that players took. And in the days before that, they'd go out to the course, arrive early, play the course, talk to the locals, learn how to score on the course. And when they started cataloging all of the shots and the results, they found that a lot of times the information that the locals had, the advice that you would get, actually wasn't always the best advice because the data showed something different. And I think really the same thing is true probably many times over in the digital workspace world, where having the data really starts to show where the problems are and maybe more importantly allows you to become proactive. Being reactive is the way that most of the world still works, but the proactive side of that of being able to figure out which things impact the most people, which applications are critical to their jobs and really need to be right. It's that ability to be proactive, I think, really is kind of a game-changing technology.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, that was always the goal we had when I worked in those organizations, was to be proactive. And, by identifying those core systems or services to the end user, you took away a lot of the noise as well, because you could prioritize where your work was focused. Too often you're firefighting everywhere, but by having good data, you can make good decisions.
Yeah, sorry, that whole persona notion, right? I mean, you've been involved with that for a long time. It's really understanding. I probably have 50 applications on my Surface, but realistically, there's about 4 or 5 of them that I just have to have, and a lot of the other ones, if you took it away and replaced it with something else, it doesn't really matter to me. It's kind of extra. I mean, it's useful, but it just isn't so important. But really, if you can kind of understand which are those critical applications and focus your energy on making sure that the experience when you're using those is great, a lot of good things happen.
So what do you think about the move to more browser-based applications? Do you think that's going to reduce the need to carry a Surface around or something like that? Or do you think there'll always be a laptop or an equivalent?
Well, I think you're going to have some kind of a device. I mean, I think whether you're using installed apps or you're using web apps or you're using published apps or whatever technology you're using, you've got to access that app somehow. So to me, everything is about the user. Like, it's a user-centric thing. I want to know what Ryan's experience is, and to me, the device that you're using is like, is an attribute of Ryan. It's the device you happen to be using today. Maybe tomorrow you'll be on a different device. I know I use 2 or 3 different things. I use a VM. I use my Surface. I certainly use a cell phone. And I think all of these things are kind of part of the way that I work. And so I think you really have to look at it as a user-centric thing, and the device is an attribute of the user. I think when you look more narrowly at cloud apps, which I think, I use a ton of cloud apps, and I'm sure just about everybody does. I think the only place that you're going to get interesting, useful data in order to ensure the quality of that service and to improve it is going to be at the endpoint, because you can't, if you have 10 cloud app providers, you can't instrument their clouds, right? I mean, they're providing a service to you. The only place that you can really instrument it is out at that endpoint. I think Gartner has called it a privileged vantage point. I think it was many years ago that they coined that phrase, but I think that really is true, that it's the only place where you can really kind of see what the user's actual experience is like.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. If you look at the Amazon outages last week, there's no evidence or information shared with any of us to why they were down or what was being done about it. So your only information you can get is off what you can control, which in most cases will be the endpoint. And that's all about the user again, and giving them the right tool. So I'm similar to you in the sense that I use mostly Apple products. So my iPad is my intermediate device, which is always in my bag. I've got my phone as well, obviously, which I can do some stuff on. And I'd be lost without those 2 devices. I can get away with them 80% of the time. There's only certain applications that I'll go back to a laptop for. And that just becomes a personal preference as much as a productivity preference.
Yeah, I think you use whichever one is most convenient for you and helps you get your job done. Just like a carpenter building a house has a lot of tools in his bag, and which tool he uses depends on what he's trying to do, right? I mean, if I'm trying to drive nails, a hammer's a pretty useful tool. If I'm trying to cut lumber, then I need a saw. I think you have different tools for different jobs, and my guess is that different people might choose a different device for the same problem because it's more convenient to them. They just find it more useful, and I think it's really about the user first, and the device is like sort of secondary. It's one of the tools.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in your experience, how are you finding the enterprise maturing with these sorts of tools and again, end user experience and that becoming a more known concept, I guess?
Yeah, I think it would be, sort of cliche to say it's a revolution or something like that. But I think the uptake is everywhere. But I think really, if you even step back to the broader picture, I think everyone accepts the fact that data is really useful and could be used to do a lot of things and do a lot of things better. And I'm not talking just about digital workspaces. I talk about the whole world is in the business of using data to deliver a higher quality of service and something that's more useful to people. And I think the space that that I'm interested in digital workspace is no exception to that. I think that we're still really, we're rapidly learning to take advantage of that data and do something about it. And I think the result really shows. I mean, people get really great return on their time and investment on pursuing that sort of thing because they end up fixing the problems that impact real people, and those people become happier. We're in a world where especially IT and knowledge workers are really scarce. It's very hard to hire people right now because there's just more jobs than there are people to do them. And I think when you make people more efficient, that helps. And it is also important to attracting and retaining people. What tools you'll be using when you're at that company working every day is a factor in do I want to work there. I talked to a guy that manages a large hospital system, and he said that the application that they were using is kind of dated, and the physicians complain it's hard to use, it takes too much time. They want to be doctors, right? That's what they want to spend their time doing. And so he said they found it's a significant factor in their ability to retain their staff is the quality of that service. And so anything that he can do to improve that, they see more patients. They with the same amount of people, but maybe for him, he said it's more important than that. It's the ability to retain my staff because the quality of the tools they use really impacts their view of that world.
Yeah, I remember working for a real estate company, and there was a conversation with some CEOs saying that if we don't hire staff that if we don't provide the sort of modern way of working, an app on a phone or an iPad or something like that, people won't want to come work for us because they think we're old and archaic. Even if there's nothing on the iPad, give them an iPad.
And it's also, it just bothers you, right? I mean, it's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it affects your paycheck; it affects your happiness, right? And the way you're doing your job, and nobody wants to work on stuff that's broken and difficult to use. So I think as we improve that experience, like kind of where we started, like everybody's happy, right? Because the employer is happy, the staff is happy, and the customer is happy because they get a greater quality of service. It just isn't that often that you come up with something where literally everybody wins. But I think this is kind of one of those things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think if you look at there was the movement of sort of bring your own device to work. And I'd almost go as far as saying now it's bring your own app to work, in the sense that if you are comfortable with a set of tooling, you could almost see that tooling moving around with you. So, use a CRM example. If you've worked with Salesforce, any business you go into, if they don't have a CRM or the CRM's not performing, they'll end up with Salesforce because it's a good experience. The onboarding's good. The app works. It's got all the entry points you need from a mobile, tablet, laptop point of view. and it almost becomes, I don't want to say religious, but it does drive a good experience, because it self-sells itself. The people sell it, not the company trying to sell the software. And I think that's just the byproduct of what you're saying. Happy workers who've been productive elsewhere with good tooling and a good experience accelerate the adoption elsewhere.
That's true, and I think you also have a large staff coming in that is much more experienced, IT savvy, and digitally experienced than people were years ago. I think that everybody does. It starts with when one of my kids told me something. You got to crack me up, because she's like 16 and says something about, they got a 504 error. How embarrassing, And I just thought to myself, wow, this is just the level where people come from, because they use the digital technologies not just in their job, but they use it at home in a consumer experience. And I think that as they get more savvy, what you were just saying is exactly what happens, which is they tend to want to bring their tools, and they want, more importantly, they want that consumer like experience every day in their job, like they expect when they're at home. And why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they have everyone should have that kind of experience. There was a study recently that something like 1 in 100 digital workspace problems gets reported to IT, like 1 in 100. Because people just, they don't want to call the help desk. They struggle through it. They deal with it. But if you think about what that means, and think about what the opportunity is in terms of making people happier, if you can just solve any small number of problems, people will start to have a much better experience. And I think that's where kind of that proactive side of the world comes in.
Yeah, I remember we did some of the study, and we found that often the person wouldn't raise a ticket because at the time they would rather muscle through the problem because they were on a deadline. And then when they got through the problem and delivered what they needed to deliver, they felt that it wasn't necessary to raise a ticket because it wasn't a pressing issue anymore. And often the person they were dealing with to help fix the issue knew less about the problem than they knew.
Yeah. Well, and once they've solved it, they don't need anybody's help anymore. I know how to solve that. Unfortunately, they go on solving the problem, fixing the problem over and over and over again because they know how, and you just accept that. But this is where people's frustration tends to come from, because they start to feel like, yeah, what do they, why do I have to deal with this all the time? And sometimes the answer is because nobody knows that you're having the problem in the first place. Nobody's going to fix it if they don't know. But I think that's where that proactive side of the world really comes into play, and I think that's making a difference for many companies today.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I worked for an organization where there was a huge resistance to logging a ticket, and what they would rather do is they'd wait till an executive comes in for the coffee break meeting, and then they'd almost launch all their problems at this poor executive, saying, "Oh, this thing doesn't work, that thing doesn't work." And then that would get fed through the executive chain all the way back down to engineering ops to say, "Oh, these are all big problems." And people would sort of look at each other and go, "We've never heard of these problems. We've never seen them." Yeah.
But when you check them out, it turns out they are a problem, right? It's real. You just didn't know about it, and that's where having that ability to kind of objectively see what's going on without relying on people calling you and telling you, that's kind of really key. And I think that's where digital workspaces are right now. It's harder. If you think about many companies, they manage their servers, they manage their data center, they manage power, they manage security, they manage their networking, they manage everything, right? Except the edge, except the endpoints. But all of the user experience occurs right at that edge. And so I think that the most important thing in some cases is the one thing that they're not managing, and that really, I look at that, that's really opportunity. It's really an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I remember moving from JP Morgan to another company, big bank, everything's encrypted, everything's got controls and risk, because it's part of the culture, to this other organization where none of that was in place. And it was the biggest shell shock because you knew that there was a certain level of things that should have been in place and they weren't in place. And you could talk to the operational guys on the floor, and they were just chasing all these problems all the time because there was none of the basics, standardization, monitoring tools, processes to scale, proactiveness. None of those things were there. And you could just never see them getting ahead of the problem. They were always going to be behind.
Yeah, well, that's the benefit of proactive when you start to get a win is that every little win you get there is amplified and reduces the reactive side of the world. And it's a hard thing to get used to because you're really, really busy in the reactive world and you don't have any spare cycles to start being proactive. But if you can find a way to just get a little bit of a start, what happens is you start to take a dent out of the reactive side, and then you start to have more cycles. And as you have more cycles, if you put those back into being more proactive and fixing more things, you have even more cycles. And so it's hard to get that ball started, but once it's rolling, it tends to pick up speed. And I don't think that means, and by the way, that reactive will entirely go away. There will always be some amount of that happens because some errors are self-inflicted. It's a user made a mistake and they need help. Nothing wrong. They just need help. They need training. They need to know how to do something, or just unusual things. I think that'll still be there, but I think as people get better and better at proactive, more incidents will be resolved, will be avoided that way than will be fixed. The reactive way.
Yeah, you're so right. I remember when we started our proactive stuff 10 years ago, and you start seeing the first sort of things coming through. I mean, just doing a disk cleanup, such a simple exercise, or forcing a machine to reboot. Because you have the data and you're doing the monitoring, you can see the health scores go up. You can see tickets go away because that's really what you're trying to avoid in most of these cases is tickets being created. Usually because that ticket's got a dollar value to it. Because you're using an outsourced team, sort of level 1, level 2. So there's for the company, you're saving money, but for the end user, you're giving them a better experience because you're proactively fixing. And you're also changing their perception of IT. IT is just those guys when there's probably go to them and they always tell you it's hard. But now you're showing them that you can do something in a good way that proactively fixes their machine, which is a good use of automation.
Yeah. I agree. If you think the example I always like is like you have crashes that occur and, people restart the app and they continue on. They're a little frustrated. Maybe I lost a little bit of work. Maybe I didn't. But those crashes happen. And, when you start to actually pay attention to that and you start to catalog those and you start to look at their crash signature and figure out which ones are the same and which ones are different and start to say, well, this one only happens on Ryan's system. Okay, it's his system. There's something wrong on that system to fix. Whereas, you look at this one and say, wow, this is impacting like thousands of people in our organization. I have the ability to go out to the vendor of that application and say, hey, I've got thousands of people and this is the crash signature and I can, give you as many examples as you'd like to see. And by the way, I can tell you what's happening leading up to that and, about system resources and what it's connected to. I can give you all that data to help that vendor fix that problem. Sometimes you can go out and look at community-wide data and say, well, not only is this happening in my organization, but it's happening to lots of organizations. There's no point in me kind of chasing that internally on a reactive basis. I'll go get a hold of the vendor and try to get it fixed. But if you don't have that data and you don't see it in the first place, it just keeps on happening. And this is where the other 99 problems that don't get reported happen. It crashes and people go, bummer, I hate that. But I deal with it and I restart it and life continued again. I don't call anybody. I don't tell anybody. I just deal with it. So I think that proactive side is just really powerful.
Yeah. I think it's the way of the future. I mean, we remember looking at, I suppose a couple of things to this. One was with having a base build, which is your standard for all your machines. all your proactive fixes become built into your new build, so your build becomes more stable. And then you build new proactive fixes. So you're spending your time consistently optimizing your base image, which becomes your corporate build for your laptops or your VDIs or whatever. And it becomes so finely tuned that it starts branching out into the services that support it. So, go back to our Salesforce example, you're not going to do much of that because it's cloud-based, but you could fix your network connections out to the internet. You could improve your firewalling because now you're not so much hampered by all these reactive situations.
Yeah, or by the resources that it takes your browser to run that app. That's a factor too. I think one of the challenges with the whole proactive thing is there is a lot of data involved. I mean, there's a lot of data, and the reason is that there's so many things that can go wrong. I mean, why would you possibly care about recording the USB device usage history on a system? Why would you possibly care about that? Well, most of the time you probably don't. But if you're planning, for the next device, you might care about that. And maybe more importantly, maybe the problem you're trying to solve is related to a change in the device history. Just picking like one tiny little example, but there's so many things that are possibly feeding into problems. It leads to needing to build a really, really high quality system of record that can be both deep and wide. I've just learned that over the years that that having the information. I guess my parallel would be like in the airline industry, right? They run a black box on the airplane. They keep that data most of the time. They collect the data. The data gets old. The data gets deleted. Nobody needed it, right? But the one time when you really need that data, its value is incredible. But in order to make it happen, you got to collect a huge amount of information all the time so that when something does go wrong, you have the ability to solve that problem the first time with one example. And I think that's a challenge in our business. But there are architectural ways to do that, and I think I know it's possible with the technology we have today.
Yeah, you look at planes, and it's almost surprising that they aren't feeding their data. That black box isn't streaming through some satellite system to a centralized hub or nearby hub, wherever it goes. I mean, you look at the MH370 and its disappearance.
Well, I think the reason is that the amount of data that's collected, the number of things that's recorded at the frequency they're recording, is an extraordinary amount of information. And even if you did that, you would still have cases where the connectivity is lost. Now the records are incomplete, right? It's exact parallel to digital workspaces with workers that are working all over the place. Sometimes you don't have that connectivity, but you really want to have that record. And most of the time, the vast majority of the time, nobody actually needs all of that information. It's only when I'm looking at a specific kind of problem that happens. And this is, to me, this is where the power of edge kind of factors in. Cloud. For our company, just about all new product that we sell is our cloud platform. We still have an on-prem platform, and there's certain unusual cases where that makes sense, but almost all customers are on the cloud platform. However, just being on a cloud platform doesn't mean that we don't use any edge computing. That really high quality system of record that's recording an incredible amount of data. Incredible amount of data. I think we looked at a bank recently that has something like 100,000 systems. I think we were recording like 300 or 400 million samples per second across that enterprise. And it seems like a huge amount, but when you use edge computing, it's super cheap, right? I mean, you can keep it right at the edge. You can do it and no one will use almost no resources at all to do it. Just like in the airline industry, where just keeping it in that black box recorder, and then you send to the ground station for an airplane, to the cloud for my kind of thing. You send just certain kind of summary data most of the time. You want to know what the what the aircraft ID is. You want to know the altitude. You want to know the airspeed, right? I mean, you can send those things all the time, but you can really keep the high quality, the high resolution data, very cheaply right in that black box recorder. And I think we do exactly the same thing for exactly the same reasons.
Yeah, and that makes sense when you think about proactive solutions. You fix them at the edge, but you give the feedback to the central brain, if you like, to say, well, we had this issue on this device, so we fixed it. That goes into the central repository. That gets calculated as part of a next set of fixed rules, if you like, and that gets pushed down to all the edges again to say, well, if you have this problem in the future, try this solution first. Then then if that doesn't work, try this one, and you have a more intelligent system learning from all these feedback loops.
Exactly, and the connectivity is when the connectivity is there, which it in today's world mostly is. It's very easy to reach out to that edge and grab anything that you need when you want that level of detail. So you don't really lose anything. It's just that the advantage of edge in terms of scalability, in terms of mobility, in terms of dealing with lack of connectivity. Sometimes there's advantages in privacy. Where you don't have to send all that information to a central thing. You just keep it right on the machine itself, close to where the data is. There's advantages there. There's just so many reasons, and I think you point to one of the really great ones. There's a Peter Levine paper some years back that really did a nice job of, I think it was like the end of cloud computing or something like that, which was kind of tongue in cheek, right? But the point was really that there are a lot of things that make sense as edge computing, complementing what a cloud does, where cloud can be your sometimes your command and control, but sometimes you need to make decisions very rapidly in real time, and doing that from an edge platform makes a ton of sense. And I think in the digital workspace world, that's especially the case, where the ability for that endpoint to be able to make its own decisions and act on it in real time is important. My classic example is, think about you're working remotely somewhere and you got a problem with your wireless adapter. Well, hopefully you've got enough intelligence on the edge and enough autonomy that you can run automation and fix it without having to talk to the cloud, because the whole problem is you can't talk to the cloud. So that edge computing action, I think that you just described is a win.
I mean, that's probably the most common situation prior to the pandemic. People traveling around and having an issue in a hotel, trying to use the Wi-Fi, and they can't get on, or they can get on the Wi-Fi, but it's so poor they can't get the VPN connected or something like that. And that's when you realize how much help you need from a technical person, but from your support desk, and how difficult that is to assist with remotely if you can't get connected.
That's right.
All these sort of tools. So it's always a conundrum to try and fix all those or perceive all those problems, but that's where the data always makes such a big difference. If you've got the patterns that you can see these things are causing.
Yeah, I think the world, it's a combination of cloud and edge computing that makes a lot of architectural sense in my world for what I work on, and I think in a lot of things, it does make a ton of sense. But in any case, the key to all of this is really having the high quality data of what people are trying to do and how well it's working or not working, and enough details to be able to fix problems, and the ability to proactively get out in front of things, fix things before people actually complain. It's game changing for a customer. It's the first time that the architectural team calls the help desk and said, hey, we've got this proactive problem here that we've discovered today. We're working on fixing it. You may get some calls today, about people struggling with this. No need to ticket it. We're already working on it, resolving it. Or even a step better, put a note in the ticket when the user goes to try to report it. It comes up and says, no, there's an IT bulletin that says, yeah, we're having a problem with that app today, and we already know about it. We're working on fixing it, and you don't need to ticket it. You can save thousands and thousands of tickets, and the people that were just answering calls and telling people that, yeah, hey, we already got that fixed. We're already working on that. Maybe that time is better spent doing other things. And when you change to that proactive model, it's just like your whole view is your view of the way you run IT is permanently different.
Yeah, and it changes perception. We had a survey in one of the companies I worked for where IT was the number one problem. Things weren't fixed or whatever the reasons were. And just by saying that you're aware of it, that gets the, okay, well, at least they know about it. I don't have to raise a ticket. They're on the ball. And it puts confidence back into the service they're getting, which means when you have a conversation about something else, maybe investing more in new hardware or something like that, you're starting from a confident place with IT as knowing what they're doing versus IT that's not in a good position.
Yeah, quantified business impact, right? When you can show what you're doing to make the business better, it just changes the way people's perception of IT fundamentally. And I think really, if you think even take a wider view of digital workspaces and say, this actually impacts more than IT people. This impacts HR. It affects how happy are people. It affects their retention. It affects planning. It affects so many different things and so many parts of the job. I mean, look at your own work at a couple of really large banks and all the uses that you found for data that weren't IT. That at least they weren't strictly IT.
Yeah, join a mover lever. That's a fantastic process. I mean, a fantastic use of data for a process because you have someone coming in, they're taking on a role. You know what the role had, what the person who had the role before had, in the sense of applications or security access or the device they were using. So you can order the right device, so you're not spending potentially unnecessary funds buying an over-spec machine. But you're also giving the person that joins all the accesses they need to make their onboarding a lot better. And then if someone's moving roles, you're taking the access away and you're giving them the access they need for the new role. So that's from a security point of view, quite a big deal. And then again, the right choice for the right hardware. So everyone feels like it's a much better experience because you're giving them almost a white glove experience. But you're just using.
I completely agree. I had one just really classic example. I had a customer who ended up using the data. They're building a new building, and they're moving some of the people from several other buildings, moving a department into this new thing, and they're trying to figure out how big of a parking lot do we need, because they don't all work the same shift. They work different times, and somebody said, well, they're all knowledge workers, and we know we can easily produce a concurrency map, show us how many people are logged in by day on a given period of time. And they ended up using the data to size their parking lot, because we know how many people are going to be here at any point in time. And then somebody even said, well, look, we can look at the steepness of the curves on Monday morning and Friday afternoon and know how many lanes we need, for in and out of the parking lot. And I just loved it, not so much because it had like a gigantic impact, but just because it was a really novel use of what normally would be pretty IT-ish kind of data in a really non-IT kind of way. And I think that I think there's so much opportunity to do that, and really for customers to create business impact that's meaningful, that goes even beyond IT.
Oh, that's such a good example. I was thinking about airports, and I've seen these sort of red-green lights. When you park at the airport, it tells you that you've taken the spot, and then they can count how many parking spaces are open versus closed. And that just saves you time with wasting time driving around looking for a parking spot.
Yeah. Go to the third floor, right? It's the same exact parallel, using the data to make people happier, because that person that's driving around in that parking lot, it's not very fun. It's very stressful. If you can solve that problem for people, you'll have a happier customer.
Definitely. If you look at the average business that you sort of talk to, I mean, is there a sense now that, I mean, obviously more now with the pandemic than before, but is there a sense now that they're going more mobile first versus office first? I mean, the sort of cloud to edge analogy is the same as being in the office versus working on outside. I mean, are you seeing something along those lines from your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad mix, right? And it's a pretty fluid situation these days in the world in general. If I had to kind of, say what do we see the most, I think we see IT wanting to provide flexibility. They want to be in a position where, if we all wanted to work at the office, we could, no problem. If we all wanted to work remote, we could. I think a lot of organizations are settling on a hybrid model where it's great for people to get together and collaborate and be a team, and do their collaboration kind of live when they can. I think it's fun, and you do get a little bit of that 1 + 1 = 3, or 1 + 1 = 11. Yeah, sometimes kind of feeling. But I think there's also a recognition that people have parts of their job that really don't require that collaboration, and sometimes people can be productive wherever they are, and you really want people to be happy and to maximize productivity. So I think I would answer that question by saying most of my customers, it's very important to them right now to be able to support a hybrid or a anywhere kind of model. So we're prepared to have everybody work remotely. We're prepared to have everybody work in the office, and we're prepared to have any combination that kind of makes sense for the business, where IT is just going to facilitate that flexibility for the rest of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because you think about hiring now. It used to be that you only hired people in a geographic location that suited your business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you had to have let's not talk about the tax implications and all that kind of stuff. But if you wanted to hire someone, they had to be traveling distance to your office. But nowadays, you can hire anyone as long as their time zone appropriate, really.
Yeah. Well, we're having this chat today over thousands of miles, right? We could be sitting. I have my coffee. We could be sitting in the same place having coffee, and that certainly would be nice to see you. I would enjoy that on a personal basis, but it works quite well the way we're doing it. And where you need, where you can't find enough people in the geo that you used to look in, I think that's a plus. It's also sometimes specialists that you need that they aren't everywhere. You can't find them everywhere, and that flexibility to be able to hire people wherever they are, I think is a real plus sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you can also leverage the time zone differences. If someone's a couple hours ahead of you, you benefit from them working before you come online. And in the same token, you've got the time zones behind you that you finish working for the day, and they can carry on working on something. So you really get in inverted commas, a full use of 24 hours, because you're incrementally moving forward. But now you've got the technology to just sort of do the handoffs as you go, to keep the momentum up.
Yeah, and that takes you into being careful that you have the right work and home balance. When you're running in that model, especially sometimes managers tend to become 24/7 creatures, which is not helpful. It's another nice thing you can do with data if you need it. Making sure people are not working 24/7, because you really, if you're like my company, you really value your people. Your people is your most important asset by a long shot, and you really want them to be healthy for the long term. You really want to retain them forever, and you want them really to be happy, and because it translates into better staff, better quality of work. It's better all the way around. And I think there's opportunities to do that with data too, to have the automation remind people, hey, you need some time off. I think that there is a strong need for that kind of thing to protect people as important, really the most important part of most companies.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And if you look at the way smart devices have played their part, I mean, my watch will tell me I need to get up and go for a walk. I was talking to someone this week about notifications on your desktop to say it's time for a break. You've been sitting for too long. The actual desktop telling them as opposed to their smart device. But also as part of their sort of daily check-in, asking a person how they feel, because you're not seeing them physically all the time. You can't pick up the the sort of behavioral changes of someone that's going through a rough time or, just needs someone to have a chat with them. And also, I find people don't like to use their cameras. So you're also missing the facial or the body language expressions that can also give you a hint that maybe you need to have a side chat and see if they're okay.
Yep. I think all of those things are true, and it has to do with really, again, if you look at it's IT's job to support a healthy working model, whatever that model is, whatever's best for the people, that's what you should do, and then IT should facilitate that. Unfortunately, that's a hard job for IT to do. It's much more complicated, but I think it's something that everyone is, the organizations we deal with are stepping up and providing a way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a nice position change for IT. I know we talked a lot about IT in this call, but it's a nice change in the sense that it's moving away from being often the cost center that's a begrudging purchase to a part of the solution or an enabler for the business to get more value quicker or accelerate.
Yeah, I think measuring business impact, we talk about that a lot. It's how can you, if you can show me, if I'm the business owner, if you could show me, what I'm going to get for that investment and what I realized, it's really easy to fund a lot of things if I'm getting that kind of return. But if you can't really measure that impact, it's a lot harder because it feels like we're putting so much money into IT, and I don't really know what I'm getting out of that. That ability to measure that and report on it, I think is a healthy thing for everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's about a balance of when someone says, rising waters rise all boats or something. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's positive for all of us.
Yeah, it is true.
Great. Well, thanks very much for coming on to the podcast. Is there any way that you'd want people to get in contact with you if they're interested?
You find me on LinkedIn easily. I'm not hard to find there. You'll find the company and what we do with digital workspaces at lakesidesoftware.com, and would be happy to follow up with anybody. And I guess my message to people is I really look at digital workspaces and the data science and the ability to become more proactive as an opportunity. It'll really, you can become a hero for your organization, and you can really make a positive difference that again, it's this rare opportunity to make the business happy, the employees happy, and your customers happy, all with the same thing. It really feels great when you get those kinds of wins. And it's been great chatting. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Mike. Yeah, you're so right. It's always good to chat, and hopefully next time we chat will be in Michigan somewhere, or I don't know, UK or South Africa, depends.
That sounds really great to me. Really great.
Super. Cool.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.